The shuttle touched down with a soft metallic hiss, its landing gears folding into the pale stone platform beneath. Bladeform Academy loomed ahead like a fortress carved from obsidian and starlight. Turrets of steel curled skyward like the horns of ancient beasts, while golden flags bearing the sigil of the Intergalactic Combat Coalition fluttered gently in the filtered atmosphere. New cadets of every species were stepping out, gazing up with a mix of reverence and anxiety. Among them was a single human, a young woman named Alex Monroe. Alex didn't stand out in size or build. Her physique was athletic, lean rather than muscular. She carried no glowing weapons or floating combat drones. Her short brown hair was tucked under a standard-issue helmet, and the only visible weapon on her person was a simple knife, strapped to her thigh in a plain leather sheath. While others carried customized blades with vibrating edges, plasma disruptors, or kinetic whips curled like serpents, Alex's knife seemed like a relic, forgotten and unimpressive. Her first few steps onto the landing pad were cautious but purposeful. She looked around with calm eyes, scanning her surroundings like someone used to being underestimated. Already, whispers had begun around her. A duo of insectoid cadets chittered quietly as their compound eyes flicked to her leg. One pointed at the knife, then made a slicing motion across his neck, laughing in clicks and hums. But Alex ignored them. Inside the Academy's grand hall, cadets assembled in rows by species classification. A ceremony was underway. The combat instructors, each decorated with silver markings and war braids, watched silently from the raised platform above. At the center of that platform stood Commander Vrek, the Academy's chief of close combat training. He was a veteran of 6 campaigns, a Hultari, tall, broad, 6-limbed, and covered in segmented armor that shimmered with faint blue iridescence. His 4 eyes glowed with an amber intensity that made most recruits avert their gaze. Vrek took one look at the human cadet and smirked, exposing rows of jagged teeth beneath his hardened jaw. He tapped one of his curved daggers on the podium, producing a sharp ting. "Welcome to Bladeform Academy," he roared. His voice echoed like thunder wrapped in gravel. "Here, we strip away your illusions. Your homeworlds taught you lies. Here, you learn truth, forged in bone, sharpened in failure, and tested in blood." He gestured with one of his massive lower arms. "Those who believe they are ready, step forward and show us your weapon of choice. The blade defines you. The blade reveals your soul." One by one, cadets approached and revealed their weapons. A Zarnak beast warrior unhooked a chain axe that snarled with charged coils. A slim Elvenari female unveiled a crystalline sword that shimmered like ice. Vrek offered nods, grunts, or silence, judgments without explanation. Then Alex stepped forward, and silence rippled across the crowd like a wave. She reached down, unbuckled the sheath, and presented her knife. It was plain, a blackened carbon steel blade about 18 centimeters long, double-edged, sharpened to surgical precision, but completely devoid of flair. No glow, no hum, no reactive smart metal, just steel, handle, grip, and discipline. Vrek blinked all 4 eyes at once, then he burst into a deep, growling laugh that shook the banners above. "A knife?" he bellowed, turning to the other instructors. "She brings a kitchen blade to blade form. Was the human war chest empty, girl?" Alex looked him in the eye. "I brought what I need." Another wave of laughter rolled across the room. Some cadets pointed. One of the reptilian twins mimicked cutting vegetables. Alex stood still, her face a mask of composure, but inside her heart hammered like a war drum. She knew this would happen. Earth was new to the Coalition. Deathworlders, they called her kind. Dangerous, unpredictable, primitive. Humans had only recently been allowed to enroll in joint military academies, and only a handful were accepted each year. Vrek walked down from the platform with heavy steps that echoed across the stone. He circled Alex like a predator gauging prey. "You think that toy will help you survive your first combat trial?" he asked, one massive arm crossing the other. She nodded once. Yes. He leaned down, all 6 arms folding behind his back. Then let's hope you're better than your blade. Later that evening, Alex unpacked her gear in the dormitory wing. The rooms were small but efficient. Single sleeping pods, 1 desk, and a shared hygiene unit for every 10 cadets. Her roommate was absent, probably at the orientation feast. Alex wasn't hungry. She unwrapped a soft cloth roll and laid her knife on the desk. It wasn't just any blade. It was her father's. He had been a field medic during Earth's final orbital conflict. Not a soldier by training, but he had saved lives under enemy fire using this very knife. It had cut uniforms, field-dressed wounds, disabled bombs, even once disarmed an enemy in hand-to-hand. After the war, he had given it to her when she joined the Earth Defense Cadet Corps. This knife doesn't hum, he had told her, but it never fails. She'd trained with it for 5 years. Every scar she bore had a lesson, and every move she'd perfected came from using this simple blade. The alien cadets might not understand it. The instructors might mock it. But Alex knew what the knife was. Not just a weapon, but a truth. It wasn't about the blade. It was about the hand that held it. She held it now, gripping it tightly. Her thumb rested against the ridge on the hilt, her breath steadying. She would show them. Not today, not with words, but when the time came to fight, she would let the blade speak for her. Outside her window, the 2 moons of Varan Station glowed pale against the black sky. The stars stretched like silver scratches across the void. Somewhere in those stars, thousands of species judged humanity, thought of them as chaotic, emotional, reckless. Let them. Tomorrow, she would take the training floor, and if the universe still doubted Earth, she'd make sure the next time someone saw a human holding a blade, they'd remember her name. The morning air in the combat dome was dry and sharp, filtered through turbines buried in the walls. The light that poured in through the reinforced ceiling panels shifted hues every hour, mimicking different planetary suns to disorient cadets and force rapid adaptation. It was training by chaos. No one knew what to expect. Alex stood in line with the rest of the recruits, her posture calm, shoulders squared. The smell of ionized steel and oiled armor clung to the environment like static. Her hands rested at her sides, and her gaze remained fixed on the far end of the dome, where the instructors observed from a glass bay. She could feel the weight of her knife secured to her leg, silent and unassuming, but ready. Commander Vrek stood in the center of the arena, his presence impossible to ignore. His voice, amplified by his own biology, rang through the air without need for speakers. Today begins the trial of response. No simulation, no practice. Live combat, restrained by the first blood rule. His 4 amber eyes swept the room as he paced. You are not here to win. You are here to be seen. How you move, how you strike, how you fail. It will be recorded, analyzed, remembered. He pointed one of his claws at a console, and a screen shimmered to life behind him. Names began to flicker in randomized order. Opponent pairings for the morning's trial. The screen paused. Cadet Monroe, Alexandra, versus Cadet Hrag of Moltari Murmurs, flared like sparks. Hrag was a reptilian brute from a gravity-dense planet, his hide plated with natural armor that shimmered with oils secreted to deflect blades and heat. He had already made a name for himself during the physical aptitude trials, having shattered an alloy bench by accident during a stretch. His tail alone could knock down a mounted assault droid. When his name appeared next to hers, he released a low growl that seemed more amused than hostile. Alex stepped forward onto the combat floor as her opponent approached from the opposite side. Hrag towered over her, perhaps twice her mass, covered in mottled green and black scales. His weapon of choice was a crescent-shaped plasma hook, its edges glowing faint blue as it activated. He didn't speak. He just smiled, rows of sharp teeth glistening with anticipation. Vrek's voice boomed again. Standard engagement. First blood. Lethal intent permitted but monitored. Begin on my mark. Alex slipped her knife from its sheath, holding it in a reverse grip with the blade angled downward. No theatrics, no glow, just readiness. Begin! Hrag lunged. He moved faster than expected, his species' muscle density giving him explosive momentum. The plasma hook carved the air in an arc aimed to cripple rather than kill. Alex bent backward, narrowly avoiding the swing, and rolled beneath his follow-through. She didn't strike. Not yet. She needed to feel his rhythm. Hrag pivoted, swiping low with his tail. Alex jumped, landing light on her toes, and ducked under a downward swing. The heat of the plasma blade grazed her left shoulder. Not a cut, but a warning. Sparks erupted from the stone as Hrag's weapon scraped along the ground where she had just been. She circled him. He moved again, this time slower, adjusting. His posture dropped slightly, understanding now that this was not going to be over in one blow. Alex feinted right, darted left, and made her first strike, a small cut behind Hrag's knee where the armor was weakest. The knife bit through and drew a single drop of dark fluid before she retreated. Hrag roared. First blood had been drawn, but the match wasn't called. He charged again, enraged now. His swings lost precision, but gained violence. Alex deflected one with the back of her forearm, twisting out of the way, barely catching her footing as she rolled beneath another overhead slash. The heat of his weapon singed the floor beside her. She struck again, a shallow slash across the joint of his elbow. He reeled back, surprised not by the pain, but by her speed. He had trained for brute force. He had not trained to fight water. Alex danced backward, her breath steady. Her body moved on reflex now. She didn't think, she listened. To his steps, to his weight, to the rhythm of his lungs. His confidence was breaking. She could feel it. Hrag growled, then did something reckless. He hurled the plasma hook like a spinning discus. The weapon sailed toward her like a glowing crescent moon. Alex dropped, skidded on one knee, and tilted her head just far enough for the blade to pass, its heat raking the air beside her ear. She rose as it embedded itself into the dome wall, sparking violently. She didn't waste time. She surged forward. One step, two. She climbed up his forward leg like a ladder, planted her foot on his hip, and used her momentum to vault upward. Her knife flashed, a precise, sharp line across the soft membrane below his eye. The moment her boots touched the ground again, Hrag froze. Freck's voice cut in like a blade. Stop. Silence. Hrag's eye bled, a thin stream trailing down his cheek. The strike had not blinded him, but it had humiliated him. He looked down at Alex, whose stance remained open, ready for a second round, but there wouldn't be one. Trial concluded, Freck announced. Cadet Monroe. First blood, final blood. Gasps broke the silence. Alex exhaled, then sheathed her knife. Hrag said nothing. He simply nodded once, not a gesture of surrender, but acknowledgement. He stepped back toward the waiting bay, and Alex followed toward the opposite exit. Eyes followed her now, but the laughter from before was gone. She walked through the doors of the combat dome, her hands steady, her mind clear. She didn't need the room to cheer. She didn't need recognition. She had measured herself against the expectations of the galaxy and found them lacking. In the viewing room above, Freck leaned against the railing in thought. He had seen 1,000 styles, 1,000 cadets, but what he had just witnessed didn't fit into any box. No doctrine, no recorded form, just raw instinct shaped by discipline. He didn't smile, but he didn't laugh either. He made a note in the evaluation log. Human cadet, unconventional, highly dangerous. Outside the dome, Alex stood beneath the artificial light of the courtyard sky. Her hand brushed the hilt of her knife again, not in pride, not in arrogance, in readiness. This was only the beginning. The silence of the Academy's East Barracks was interrupted only by the faint hum of the filtration vents and the soft creak of metal as Alex adjusted her grip. She sat cross-legged on the floor of her room, the door locked, her armor stowed in the corner, and her knife resting in her palms like a sacred object. A strip of cloth soaked in oil lay beside her, and she moved it across the steel with methodical precision. The blade caught the artificial light and shimmered dully, a humble glint rather than the arrogant glow of energy weapons. Her muscles ached from the morning trial. There were faint bruises on her ribs where Hrag's tail had nearly clipped her, and a slight burn along her left shoulder that she hadn't bothered treating yet. The pain grounded her. It reminded her that she was still within her limits, still alive, still sharp. She tilted the blade, inspected the edge, and began the ritual again. Swipe, fold, swipe again. The movements were not about maintenance. The knife could cut just fine. This was about clarity, about centering. She had learned the ritual from her father. He used to clean his blade after every mission, no matter how clean it was. She had asked him once if the knife remembered. He had answered without turning his head, "Only if you let it." Alex let hers remember. She had not expected to be called out so early in the cycle. Normally, cadets were observed for weeks before receiving their first formal pairing. The fact that she had been chosen so quickly and against someone like Hrag could not be an accident. Someone had been watching, perhaps Vrek, perhaps someone else. It didn't matter. The result had been logged. The entire academy now looked at her differently, but it wasn't fear or praise she wanted. It was space, enough space to train, to learn, to adapt. The console on her desk beeped twice. A message flashed across the screen. Cadet Monroe, summoned to Instructor Hall 4B. Immediate attendance required. She blinked, stood, and slid the knife back into its sheath. The halls were quiet at this hour. Most cadets were in the mess halls or attending lectures on tactical formations. Alex passed 2 insectoid recruits, whispering along the corridor wall. They glanced at her as she moved, their antennae twitching slightly, but neither spoke. She didn't slow. Her mind had already begun running possibilities. She hadn't broken any regulations. First blood had been drawn cleanly. No foul reports, no complaints. And yet, the summons bore the unmistakable weight of something important. Instructor Hall 4B was buried deep within the lower decks of the facility. The door slid open at her presence, revealing a narrow chamber filled with holographic projections of archived combat footage. A circular table dominated the center of the room, and around it stood 3 instructors, 2 of them unknown to her, and 1 unmistakable. Vrek. He turned toward her without speaking and gestured for her to enter. She stepped in and saluted. The taller of the 2 unknown instructors, a Zarn diplomat clad in ceremonial robes, tilted his head. His skin was translucent, and beneath the surface, veins of glowing green energy pulsed slowly. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of authority. "We've reviewed your trial in full," he said. "We have questions." Alex remained silent, her gaze steady. The second instructor, a humanoid with polished silver skin and no visible mouth, adjusted the holographic controls. A paused image of her final strike on Hrag's eye appeared, frozen mid-motion. "Your method of movement does not follow any registered Earth combat school currently uploaded to the database," he said. "Please explain your origin." "I was trained off record," she answered. "Earth's Frontier Division runs combat programs not broadcast to the Coalition. They emphasize improvisation over codified style." "Improvisation," Vrek repeated, his arms crossed behind his back. "You made 3 predictive evasions against Hrag's attacks that would normally require ocular premonition. Explain." "I don't read motion the way most species do," she said. "I listen to breath, angle of stance, compression in the heel. My body reacts faster than conscious thought if I stay in the right mental zone." Vrek studied her for a moment, then stepped closer. "Let me see it." Alex hesitated. "See what?" "The knife," he said. She drew it slowly, holding it out flat across her palms. Vrek took it between 2 of his hands, turning it gently. The blade was blackened from use, but its edge was flawless. The grip was worn smooth. It had seen battles. real ones, not simulations. "This weapon is not standard military issue," he said. "Where did you acquire it?" "My father," she replied. "He was a combat medic. Earth orbit conflict." "Does the blade have a name?" "No," she said quietly. "Only purpose." Vrek handed it back. "You will duel again in 3 days," he said. "Against an instructor. No students. No observers. Your blade will be recorded." The other instructors exchanged glances, but neither objected. Alex nodded. Understood. She left the chamber without asking questions. She had learned to accept tests when they arrived, not fear them. The hallway outside seemed darker now, as if her acceptance of the challenge had shifted something subtle in the air around her. Back in her room, she didn't sit. She removed the sheath and placed the knife flat on the table. She then began moving, slowly at first, then faster. The desk became an obstacle, the bed frame a corner to pivot from. Her boots whispered against the floor as she trained, not with flourishes, not with theatrics, with function. Stab pivot, elbow, drop low, slice upward, recover, again. She imagined the instructor, not Vrek, someone more precise, more analytical, someone who would wait for her to make a mistake and strike only once. She had to be perfect, not just skilled, measured. She didn't care about impressing the coalition, but if the blade was going to speak, she needed to sharpen the voice. She continued moving long after the lighting dimmed to night mode. Her muscles burned, her lungs heaved, her mind narrowed. The blade remembered, and now, so did she. The chamber was cold, not in temperature, but in tone. The training dome designated for instructor-level sparring was not made of the same stone and alloy blend used in the cadet arenas. Its floor was a dense composite of memory-reactive polymers that recorded pressure, speed, and gravitational shifts. The walls were a seamless matte obsidian, devoid of banners or insignia. There was no audience seating, no overhead lighting beyond a focused beam from the ceiling. One light, one circle, one duel. Alex stood alone in the center, her shoulders squared, her knife gripped loosely in her right hand. Her breathing was even, her pulse quiet, her senses tuned to the faint hum of the walls and the sterile scent of the chamber. She had not been told who her opponent would be, only that he would not hold back, that he had requested the duel, that it would be logged in the Coalition's central database under exceptional training encounters. She could live with that. The door across the arena hissed open. Commander Vrek entered. He was unarmored, his segmented torso exposed, his limbs bare, yet he looked no less formidable. His 4 lower arms were bound in black cloth, knotted at the elbows, leaving his 2 primary arms free to move. His expression was unreadable. He walked forward without a word and stopped 3 meters from her. "You will fight as if your rank depends on it," he said. "Because it does." Alex gave a single nod. "Understood." He looked at her knife. "You will not die here, Cadet Monroe, but you might wish to." She didn't respond. Words meant nothing now. The overhead beam narrowed, casting a circle of light around them. A signal tone pulsed once from the wall, low, vibrating, final. "Begin." Vrek didn't charge. He studied. His lower arms remained behind his back as his upper right hand drew a curved sparring blade, long, single-edged, designed to mimic the speed of real combat without risking organ rupture. It gleamed in the light, lighter than his usual weapon, but just as dangerous. Alex moved first, not to strike, but to test. She shifted to the side, lowered her stance, and stepped in with a feint toward his flank. Vrek responded without moving his feet, parrying with a tight arc that forced her blade away without overextending. His counterattack was a downward diagonal slash that would have split bone if she hadn't dropped low and rolled backward. She reset, breathing once, twice. Vrek advanced. He was fast. For a creature his size, impossibly so. His steps were silent, his center of gravity always balanced. His blade came in a precise rhythm: slash, rotate, jab, retract. He moved as though every action had already been written, and he was simply following choreography crafted by gods. Alex deflected one strike, redirected another, and felt her knife vibrate as it caught the edge of his blade. Sparks snapped. Her heel caught the floor. She recovered, barely, and slipped under his next swing, pivoting behind him. She slashed at the back of his knee, a weak point on most bipeds, but his tail curled around and swatted her aside. She landed hard, ribs jolting against the floor. He didn't pause. She rolled away as his foot crashed down where her head had just been. The floor registered the impact with a sharp blue pulse. He was testing her limits, measuring not just her reflexes, but her will. Alex gritted her teeth and stood again. She rushed forward, this time with deliberate sloppiness, inviting him in. He took the bait. His blade came high, angled to cleave across her collarbone. She ducked and stepped inside his reach. Her elbow snapped up into his jaw. He grunted. It wasn't enough to stagger him, but it bought her a half-second. Her knife swept upward, aiming for the soft seam beneath his ribs. He blocked with his forearm, the back of his wrist catching her blade. Steel scraped scale. Then he struck her in the gut with a closed fist. Pain exploded across her midsection. Her body lifted an inch from the ground before hitting it again, the air gone from her lungs. She coughed and rolled to her knees. Her grip on the knife remained. Barely. Again, he said coldly. She rose. This time she didn't think. She moved. Slash, pivot, fake left, slash again. He blocked, deflected, caught her wrist once, but lost it when she ducked under his armpit and dragged her knife across the small of his back. It didn't cut deep, just enough to sting. He turned faster than expected, backhanding her across the face. Her vision blinked out for a split second. Blood filled her mouth. Still, she remained on her feet. He circled her now, slower, more deliberate. "What drives you?" he asked. "Pride? Vengeance? Legacy?" She spat blood to the side. "Truth." His eyes narrowed. "Whose?" She shifted her stance. "Mine." He came again, this time more brutally. His blade snapped down, up, then forward in a lunge. She sidestepped barely and slid beneath his legs. Her foot hooked behind his ankle, and she pulled. He staggered. She leapt onto his back. For one heartbeat, she was above him, knife raised, poised to strike. His tail whipped upward and knocked her skyward. She twisted in midair, managed to land in a crouch, but her knee buckled. She collapsed, coughing again. Her ribs burned. She heard his steps approaching. She didn't move. Then, with her last ounce of timing, she rolled onto her back and flicked her knife upward. It struck. The blade embedded itself into the floor beside his foot, just 3 inches from his heel. His next step would have impaled his own ankle had he moved forward. He froze. Her chest rose and fell with ragged breath. "I could have," she said quietly. He looked down at the knife, then at her. "Yes," he replied. "You could have." He stepped back and raised his hands. Trial complete. The overhead light dimmed. Silence filled the chamber like smoke. Alex remained on the ground, her arm trembling, blood running from her nose, cheek, and lower lip. She closed her eyes, just for a moment. She had survived. No, she had done more than that. She had danced with a monster and made him stop. Freck stood above her, watching. Then, without a word, he reached down, pulled her to her feet, and handed her back her knife. "You're not done yet," he said. "But now, you're seen." She nodded once, her voice gone. She left the chamber limping, every nerve raw, her soul blazing. Outside, a cadet she didn't recognize stood near the corridor, holding a datapad. He didn't speak. He just bowed his head and stepped aside. She didn't acknowledge him. She walked forward, knife in hand, and behind her, the door to the monster's den slid shut with a hiss. 3 days after the duel, the official bulletin board of Bladeform Academy displayed something that had not changed in over 17 cycles, the Combat Doctrine Index. Normally immutable, locked by the hands of tradition and the pride of war-hardened cultures, Its structure reflected centuries of alien military theory, symmetrical, inflexible, revered. That morning, a new entry appeared. Adaptive Primitive Tactics, Pilot Module, Human Origin, Instructor, Commander Vrek. The Academy's internal message stream erupted. Cadets whispered in corridors and stared longer at the human girl during meal periods, unsure whether to ask, to challenge, or to stay silent. Some tried mimicking her movements during solo drills, slicing invisible opponents in the air with crude knives repurposed from toolkits. Others mocked the idea outright, until a failed sparring match against a first-year human exchange cadet silenced the laughter. Alex stood in the observation deck that overlooked the northern training arena. She wore her standard cadet uniform, unadorned and plain, her hair tied back with a black band. Her ribs had healed, the bruises had faded, but inside, something had shifted. She no longer felt like a visitor, nor a stranger, not even a symbol. She had become a catalyst. Below, Commander Vrek's voice thundered through the open arena, but it no longer carried scorn. He moved with purpose, his tone clinical but firm. "The purpose of this module is not to glorify humans," he said. "It is to explore what happens when instinct is sharpened by failure, and tools are no longer dependent on technology, but on understanding. We begin with the first concept, misdirection through simplicity." He raised a steel training knife, modeled precisely after the one Alex used. "Each of you has studied weapon balance and mass reactive fields. Forget them. Today, you will fight with your body, not your sensors. With your breath, not your alerts. The knife in your hand is not the weapon. You are." Alex didn't smile, but she allowed herself a slow exhale. It wasn't vindication she felt. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was something quieter, the subtle weight of impact, a ripple that would not stop here. It would travel across systems, syllabi, minds. It would enter the next generation of combatants before they ever knew her name. She turned and left the deck. Her private quarters had been upgraded, without request, without announcement. It wasn't luxury that had changed. The room remained small, but now there was a weapons locker embedded in the wall, custom mounted with a display rack. Her knife sat in the center, surrounded by the faint hum of magnetic containment fields, not to protect it, but to honor it. A message blinked on her terminal. "Cadet Monroe, report to the Coalition Dispatch Office at 1700 hours." She narrowed her eyes. Dispatch? That was a strategic division, not academic. She dressed quickly and walked through the maze of upper halls, past scholars, tacticians, and veteran instructors. The air felt different up there, heavier, quieter, like every breath came at a cost. Inside the dispatch chamber, a projection table stood at the center. Around it were 4 officers, 2 of whom bore admiral bars. One turned as she entered, a woman with a narrow face and sharp silver eyes. "You are Cadet Monroe?" Alex nodded. "Yes, Admiral." The woman gestured to the table. "Sit." She obeyed. "We reviewed the footage from your instructor match," the Admiral said. "We also reviewed every prior engagement, training log, sensor record, and decision you've made in your time here. Your instincts are non-standard, your background is unregistered, and your tools are unorthodox." "Yes, Admiral." "That is not criticism." The Admiral tapped the table. A star map shimmered into view. "There is a sector called Drelvac. Border space, tensions rising, proxy conflicts escalating. We are deploying a multi-species reconnaissance and intervention team. You've been offered an early field commission. Lieutenant, 1st grade. You will report to Field Captain Marin Thok. Your deployment begins in 5 days." Alex didn't answer immediately. She studied the map, the names, the distance. She thought about the knife on her wall. "What about my graduation?" she asked. The Admiral's mouth lifted slightly. "This is it." Alex stood from the table. "I accept." The officers nodded. She returned to her quarters. There was no ceremony, no applause, no recorded announcement. Her belongings fit into one pack. Her uniform folded easily, but the knife she held separately. She didn't sheath it. She carried it in her hand as she walked to the launch bay, ignoring the few passing glances from instructors and cadets alike. She wasn't walking away from something. She was walking towards something else, something more. At the bay, Commander Vrek stood alone at the bottom of the boarding ramp. He didn't speak at first. He simply watched her approach. When she stopped before him, he extended one of his lower arms. She shook it. "You changed the shape of this place," he said. "Not many do." She inclined her head. "I didn't come to change anything." "I know," he said. "That's why it happened." He stepped aside. She boarded the transport. As the doors sealed and the engines hummed to life, Alex took the front seat, still holding her knife across her lap. She looked through the narrow viewport, past the spires of Bladeform Academy, into the starlit abyss beyond. She didn't think about titles. She didn't think about legacy. She thought about the next fight, the next lesson, the next moment her instincts would be all she had between survival and death. The knife in her hand did not glow. It did not hum, but it remembered. And now, so did the galaxy.